Hey everyone, it's Jazmine Rubi with Licata Group Real Estate, Director of Client Services here.
Hi, I'm Dan Seiler, a realtor at the Licata Group, and I think we have a special guest today
We do.
who
Poncho
decided
joined us.
to join us. This is Poncho. If you haven't met him, he'll be your greeter here at the Licata Group. We have yet to name him, but I think official greeter and office dog is our famous nomenclature for this young fellow who likes to be part of everything, and we love him to have him here too. He when we're all feeling kind of Poncho's the person in the office who comes and greets us with a wet lick and a wagging tail.
Little snorts here
Yeah,
and there.
little snorts, which you'll probably hear a little bit of today. He may want to get down eventually, but typically he's posted at the door to watch for comers and goers in the office. And if you have food, you have a friend for life. So what are we talking about today, Jazz?
So today we're talking about HOAs. Why they're important for buyers, for sellers. What is an HOA? Because a lot of people may not know what an HOA is and why it matters to you as a buyer or a seller. You want to tell us what an HOA is?
Well, yeah, when we're involved with a client, Jazmine, a lot of times we get this, I don't want to be involved with an HOA. I mean, we hear that all the time, especially in Central Virginia versus Northern Virginia. And an HOA really is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. And, just by way of definition, I thought, hey, I'll print a definition. So let me read that definition. This is the boring part, but it's pretty interesting nonetheless. So a homeowners association, by definition, is an organization in a subdivision, planned community, or condominium building too, that makes or enforces rules for properties and its residents. Those who purchase a property within an HOA jurisdiction automatically become members and are required to pay dues known as HOA fees. Now, that's what the rub is with a lot of people. Hey, I'm paying a mortgage, I'm paying taxes, I don't want to pay HOA fees. And, my thought about that is that's part of this community. And being part of a community has its pluses and minuses. And I tell folks, well, if you're part of an HOA, it typically means the neighborhood can be loosely organized. Jazz, I work with HOAs that have $50 a year HOA fee requirements. And the HOA docs are handwritten by one of the members when the neighborhood was originally started. On the other hand, we have HOAs that are more complex.
Very much so. There are, like Dan said, there's pluses and minuses to HOAs. The most important thing is to know what the cost is involved, your fees that you're paying. Is there an initial setup fee for your membership? There's so many different fees involved, and it just depends on the community and their, like you said, how it started. Has it grown to be big where it's managed by their own community, their own HOA department? Is it managed outside of that organization, outside of the community? Because I see that a lot. There's different rules, different regulations. You kind of get what you pay for. So there's some communities where, you get pools, you get parks.
Snow plowing in the wintertime.
Snow plowing in the winter. It's good to know, do your research and know what's involved, what's been paid. They often give you their finances for the HOA so you can see, are they managing their money correctly? Dues collections from are they collecting dues, late fees? What else is involved? Sometimes cleanliness of your home, of your yard. It's supposed to be maintained. You're supposed to maintain a certain standard.
Right. And that's what I talk about with my clients. they say, well, I don't want to be part of an HOA. The HOA is going to be this group of militant homeowners telling me what I got to do. And my thought in the state of Virginia is, hey, you're going to know what the laws are. Jazmine, that's a large part of what she does, is making sure you know what the large part of those laws are. Those HOA laws, they might be something that prevents your neighbor from putting a junk car on their front lawn. It might be the requirement that says, hey, you got to cut your grass and have your grass a certain length. You just can't be careless about how you manage your property. Now, let me just adjust. Just our boy's a little bit wiggly this morning. So that HOA might be the component of the neighborhood that keeps your property value appreciating. And all of us want our property as an investment to appreciate in value. So how you do that is keep a certain level of cleanliness, a certain level of upkeep. And listen, I live in an HOA. I got to notice every once in a while that I got to paint my mailbox white. That's the neighborhood standard. Do I think it's a pain in the butt? Yeah. That means I got to go out in the spring and paint my mailbox white as a community standard. But in return for that, all the mailboxes in my neighborhood look the same. They all look nice, and it keeps the neighborhood presentable, right?
And so if you're selling your home, that's great for potential buyers to look at.
Right, exactly. So
to keep going with HOA and their standards and everything like that, when you are buying or selling a home, it's important to know what your HOA requirements are. For instance, and it's great to have an agent that is familiar with the community. Specifically for us here, we're right across the street from Lake of the Woods, and that is the HOA community we work with the most. And sometimes some sellers don't realize that, the culvert, the ditch, the pipe, under your ditch or goes through your ditch, that is actually the owner's responsibility to maintain. When you receive the initial HOA documents, it does say that in there, but you do have to realize a lot of the documents are, some of them, if depending how big the community is, are thousands of pages long, so you have to read through them. And when you get a contract, you have 3 days legally to review those documents and rescind your contract based on those HOA documents. So that's very important to know as a buyer about the HOA. The seller may receive violations. Typically there's a compliance inspection that gets done when you order the HOA docs or when the seller orders the HOA documents. So like I was saying, here in Lake of the Woods, the culvert is a big issue that we see a lot, because the culvert ditches can get full of debris, leaves, rocks, sediment, and if water cannot flow, completely clean through there, then you may have to get it cleaned out, you may have to replace it. Clean outs can be as cheap as $100, and then replacing them can be upwards of $4,000, just depending on how big your pipe is, how dirty it is. There's a lot of factors that play into it. So it's good to have an agent that knows the HOA community and knows the rules and regulations, so they can help you, if you're selling your home, prepare it so you're prepared when they do that inspection and you don't have an issue later. And then as a buyer, so that way they can inform you, hey, there were some violations. We're confirming that the seller's addressing them.
If I can riff on that just a little bit, Jazmine. So when I'm out with a buyer and we're looking at a neighborhood, and, well, for instance, the buyer has one of these little guys and they want to put up a fence. Well, it's my responsibility as your representative, if that comes up in our real initial conversation, hey, I need a fence for my dog. I want to walk my dog, but I also want it in the morning when I'm having coffee. Just turn the dog loose in the morning to do the dogs. Let it do its business so I can have my coffee. Then I'll get up and we'll go for a walk and get moving further into my day. But it's my responsibility, even in today's market, to find that response really quickly on your behalf of, hey, what's neighborhood allow and what doesn't it allow? Also, I think it's important to know this, Jazmine, and I want to share this with people. So you've got your pre-approval letter, and say your pre-approval's for a level of $300,000, just for simplicity's sake. And there's a $100 HOA fee. So the way a lender looks at that $100 HOA fee, that now becomes an outflow from you when you make a purchase. So they would look at you and say, hey, that means that when you make an offer on a property that's $300,000 with a $100 HOA, you now need to get approval for $310,000. So just kind of a simple, if you will, wag or hack. For every $100 of an HOA fee, you need to have $10,000 of additional approval from your lender. Again, as an agent, it's our job to say, hey, you need to take that into mind, and especially in today's competitive market, you need to know what you can be pre-approved for, what your offer is going to be, how much above list price you're actually going to be making that offer for, and hey, do I have the additional funds to cover the cost of that HOA? Now, in the state of Virginia, like most states, it's a requirement for the seller to provide those HOA docs. And as Jazmine had talked about, you have deadlines for reading those docs. Mm-hmm. Well, remember the HOA is an institution. And as an institution, it has fiduciary responsibilities to its members. And as a member, you have a fiduciary responsibility, maybe to not know the profit and loss of the HOA, but you need to know that the HOA is solvent and won't require more funds, right? Because
definitely,
a special assessment, as you know.
I was going to say, and we see this happen not often. If you have a great agent, this shouldn't happen at all. But you know, your lender is starting to do the paperwork on the house and finds that there's an HOA that, you know, if it wasn't disclosed or they didn't know this up front, just like Dan said, they have to take that HOA dues and the HOA fees into account and wrap it up into your, you know, into your purchase price. So it's definitely important to know if that home you're making an offer on has an HOA, what those dues are, what the assessment is, if there's an assessment coming up soon. An assessment is typically, at least in my experience, it's been a large sum, lump sum that gets collected at closing. And I think when I had seen it, it was about like $1,500 or something. It was actually a community up north, where we're trying to expand and go into. So, you know, as I have started to learn about this, and it's good information to know to pass on to buyers. Like, we need to know, is there a special assessment coming up? And those are questions your agent would ask on your behalf. Right.
So when you get those documents from Jazmine, does that in our office, when you get those documents, they're going to be, I think there are a total of 7 elements, and I won't bore you with the details, but the important ones are, you're going to read a financial disclosure to talk about the solvency of the HOA. You're going to read the minutes of any meetings that have been conducted, and you're going to read any assessments as part of those meetings, and you're going to read several state required documents. And all of them are important, but there's also going to be membership documents in there as well, talking about how you become a part and participant of the HOA management group. So if your HOA is managed by, say, there's a company called State Management Group, they're a large group or something similar to that, well, then the community group acts as an advisor to those who are actually managing the funds on behalf of the HOA. But as I tell my clients, if you join an HOA and you don't like it, you're living in the community. It's your responsibility to become active in the management of that HOA. Now, it may not be pretty and it may not be fun. Typically it's not, but it is important, and it does bring you into active participation in the community. And all of those issues are outlined by Virginia statute for you to review. And I would say that's the hardest part in our job, because you're typically getting, a stack, and even if it's a small HOA, you have documents you have to read within 3 days. Now, Jazmine, can you ask for an extension on those 3 days if a buyer wants to?
That's a great question. You can ask for an extension. You can ask for up to 5 days total review period. And that would actually be something your agent can help you, set up at the contract time. If it's a HOA community that we're not familiar with, that you're not familiar with, we do try to ask for the extended times to give you those extra couple of days to review. For instance, as I mentioned, Lake of the Woods, I'm very familiar with them, so I can usually, if a client has a question, go right into all the docs. There's, like I said, there's thousands of pages, but I can typically find it because I've just been working in them so much. So it's good to know, good to know your HOA community,
Right.
or your agent to know your HOA community. Something we had mentioned previously were compliance items with HOA, and I just wanted to follow up back on that. And the sellers are typically required to bring those violations, if there was any violations, to good standard, so that way when the buyer moves in, they have a clean HOA slate.
Right.
There are different forms and inside the contracts that can be used, and one of them is for HOA, and it is specifically so the seller does not have to address those items. So I have it here, and I'll let Dan read it. It's for if the seller is selling the home as is, there's a certain as is property condition contingency that can be marked. And this is basically what it says about the seller not having to.
Right. All clauses pertaining to the seller's compliance with all other orders or notices of violation of any county or local authority are deleted. All requirements for the seller to comply with a property's owner or condominium association's notices of violation related to property or
The
physical condition or of the property are deleted. So what does this mean? This means that the seller is basically saying, I'm passing on those compliance issues to the buyer. So that means the buyer thereupon has either decided that, one, they're going to accept them. And Jazmine, we actually have the form here. It actually has a mark where both parties initial. So there's a complete understanding that the buyer is now going to shoulder those compliance issues. And while the community may not require them to fix them immediately, they are going to come to pass where during an enforcement inspection or just during a routine HOA inspection by either the management company or the HOA, there's a compliance issue that's got to be addressed at some point in time. At a very minimum would be the last time, which would be when this buyer thereupon becomes the seller if those items aren't remedied. We do have this where, say, a senior is selling a home, and they can't physically manage the process to get it repaired, but yet there's some time sensitivity to the sale, and a buyer will, in essence, agree, hey, I'll shoulder that burden on your behalf. On the other hand, the way the current contract reads, and this was a change, unless both parties agree, that compliance requirements is the seller's to remedy. It's not open for negotiation. Now, if a seller and a buyer agree in tandem to do that, that's fine. But from a buyer's presentation perspective, and this changed last year in 2020, it is now the seller's responsibility. There's no way out from that requirement if a buyer deems there should not be an avenue or an exit out from that particular compliance issue. And that's a change, and it was brought to my attention on one of my own transactions, and I was somewhat embarrassed when the agent pulled out the contract and said, you need to look at this paragraph. And you know what? That agent was right. My client said, you know what? That agent's right. We got to fix it. And what we did is that particular scenario, Jazmine and myself worked with both parties to take part of the proceeds from the sale to go back to the buyer to remedy that situation. And it happened to be, I think, a culvert, right?
Yeah, I think so.
On that particular address.
Replacing culvert.
Or it can be any other HOA violation. The key in all of this is the person sitting next to me who massages the transaction to find a contractor to do those remedies and be paid out of the settlement proceeds. And what happens after, Jazmine, we put those proceeds aside, it's remedied, and what's the next step that happens?
So once the violations have actually been remedied, you do have to get the HOA to reinspect, to write a letter. They typically will either write a letter saying, yes, these have been remedied and, you know, the home is now free and clear of violations. We've had instances happen where, you know, we ordered the reinspection, they came back and they said, you know what, it's not to our standard, so we can't pass it yet. So we have to get a contractor back out to make it to the standard, you know, whether that means meeting an HOA associate out there so we can make sure it does get done right this time. Or, you know, if we're working with contractors that are already familiar with the HOA, which happens here a lot in Lake of the Woods, we have contractors that already know what the standard is, so they know what to do, exactly how to do it, and they know when they tell me, hey, it's good to reinspect, that it'll pass. So that is something that has to happen. You do have to ask for it to be reinspected. Some places charge an additional fee to have to go back out and reinspect. Here in Lake of the Woods, we're very lucky they do not charge at this time to go back out and reinspect. Right. So it's another part of knowing your HOA and know your HOA rules and regulations and what's going to be asked of you as a buyer or as a seller when the time comes to sell.
Hey, Jazmine, special shout out. Hey, Gavin, thanks for joining us. Yes. Hey, we really appreciate you. And we love the dog too. This is my favorite part about coming into the office. I mean, obviously I love the team, but hey, you gotta love the pooch. Hey, you know, one of the other things that we've had to deal with, and we would ask all of you to deal with COVID, a lot of offices are still not entirely open, and sometimes it's difficult to get a hold of staff. And when we say a hold of staff managing the HOA, that's not only in the Lake of the Woods community, that's every community. So preparation, even in these times of fast-selling homes, is a key for all parties to be prepared to review contracts quickly, obviously, but also the HOA documents too.
Yes, let me jump in real quick, Dan. They actually can take up to 2 weeks, 14 days to, legally they have 14 days once you order the HOA packet to give those to you and give you the documents. You can order them for typically an extra fee for a fast order where they'll get it to you within 3 to 5 days, maybe less. But just, you know, what Dan said as far as preparation, that is definitely important. You don't want to wait until the day before you're closing and then you're getting your HOA docs, you don't have those 3 days to review them.
Right.
And once you sign your documents, you own that home. Even if you found later, a couple days later, oh no, this was in my HOA, you've already signed. So make sure you get them in a timely manner so you have your full 3, if you opted in for 5 days, to review.
Yeah. Hey, so getting those documents can be all over the place, right, Jazmine? Because in certain communities, they're online, right?
Yes, most of the communities here in Fredericksburg, Locust Grove, Orange County, a lot of the communities out here use a service. I think it's just a third-party service that we order the HOA documents through. Again, they have 14 days to get those back to us, so definitely want to be ordered as soon as possible to avoid any delay to the buyer, to the seller, to fixing those problems, if there are any. Sometimes they're not.
Right.
If you keep your home, if you follow the rules, regulations for your HOA, then you shouldn't have anything to worry about.
Right. And much to the credit of different HOAs, given that we're coming out of the pandemic during the 2020 coming into 2021, everybody is trying to figure out how to work around and be cooperative. I know people can't believe an HOA as being cooperative. That's not the natural instinct, but hey, these people are not the enemy. And remember, if you're in the community, you can get on the board of directors and, steer the HOA in the direction that you want them in. So feel free to, be involved in your community. I often, ask folks, hey, if you don't like what you're seeing, it's your community, jump in and get involved. Have I done it in my own? No, but I have been to HOA meetings where a particular topic came up that I wanted to address. And one topic that's coming up quite often is, hey, even in neighborhoods you wouldn't expect it, in and around Fredericksburg, people are doing Airbnbs. Is it allowed in your HOA? Who knows? You have to find out, right?
Tenants, if you are planning on renting your home out, are there additional fees for that?
Right.
Those are great questions. Those are definitely questions that if you're considering, you want to ask. Excuse me.
So we're also seeing, again, talking about tenants. Hey, you have a tenant that's not following the HOA rules. It's the homeowner's responsibility to manage the tenant. Well, then what if it's a tenant that can't be evacuated from the home due to moratoriums on expulsion that came with COVID, and those are coming to an end again here in Virginia. So those are all tendencies that have implications to an HOA situation. So
I just want to give a huge shout out to our local Lake of the Woods community HOA, because everyone that I've worked with there has always been super great, responsive. So thank you to our Lake of the Woods HOA community. I love everyone there. Yeah,
I've found everybody that I've dealt with throughout Central Virginia to be very cooperative. I do a lot of work in Stafford, Aquia Harbor, and I'm even working with some new builds where the buyers are the beginning of the HOA. The builder in that case, the builder actually sets up the HOA and then relinquishes management over a period of time, or when a certain number of the homes are built out, to the buying members. And that's interesting to see, a buyer go, well, the HOA is me. And that's exactly right. At the beginning of a community, the HOA is literally you and all who come after you for at least a year. So good stuff.
Yeah, this has been really great, really informative. If you have any, questions about your local HOA, or any questions you might have outside of HOA, just real estate related, feel free to DM us. You can always leave a comment. We'll see it and we'll take a look at respond for you.
Great.
We're going to be doing this every Tuesday at
11
a.m.
Yeah.
So tune in. You won't see us all the time. You might see our little guy featured here often, but tune in. We're excited to do this every week with a different topic.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, and we wanted to say this, and I think Jazmine and I did in a promo yesterday. If you have a topic you'd like us to address, hey, just send us a message. We'll get it and we'll talk about it. It's always good to explore, and we have agents from all over Virginia, so each one of us has a different perspective. So I think we're pretty well wrapped up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Hey.
tuning in.
Thanks again, and Pancho thanks you as well.
We'll see you next week.
All right, take care, stay safe.